Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is another edition of the App Service Community Stand-Up, May 1st, 2024. I'm your host, Byron Tardif, and we have a full house, as you can see today. We have Denver, our trusty producer, as well as Guarav and Yutang, who are here to talk to us about two features. One is the GA of the Autoscale feature for App Services, the new modern Autoscale, as well as the integration with the Azure Load Testing service and how you can use those two together to have a production level app. It's May, so we all know what that means. Build is coming. We're all, basically everybody here in the call, are working on the demos and the announcements that we have rolling out for the last 6 months of work that we've been doing for App Service. And we have a session scheduled for, I think, Thursday. So if you're going to be there in person, or if you're joining Build live through the stream, make sure to check that out. I think all of us are going to be there at the floor. If there's a booth or if there's an area for App Service, please stop by and say hi. The other thing we had yesterday was Azure Developers.NET Day. We had a session there for App Service that was talking about some of the infra work that we did to move the Windows side of the house, all of that fleet over from Server 2016 to Server 2022, and how we're starting to see the new set of features that get enabled by that, like, for example, gRPC on Windows that is also in preview. So we're going to drop a link for all of that in the blog that goes with this. But then, other than that, let's dive in. Guarav, Yutang, you want to introduce yourselves?
Hi, everyone. My name is Guarav. I'm a product manager on Azure App Services team. I work on a host of features like bring your own storage, automatic scaling, migration of web apps. And yes, very happy to be here in this community stand-up.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yutang, also another PM here on App Service. I pretty much also handle the areas of like monitoring, now Azure Load Testing, certificates, domains, whatnot. So thank you, everyone, for joining here today.
Yeah, and if you have questions about any of these areas, you have the experts on the line. So just drop your questions in the chat, and we'll do the best we can to answer them. With that in mind, why don't we dive in, Guarav? I think you have a couple slides.
Oh, yes. So we are actually going to begin with a couple of slides just to set the context and what's new with automatic scaling when it comes to GA. So let's first a quick peek into the agenda. So I'm going to talk about automatic scaling, then do a quick demo of how to configure automatic scaling on the portal. And then I'm going to hand over to Yutang, who's going to talk about how to use Azure load testing along with automatic scaling, again, because that's going to be the way forward where you could quickly do a load test against your web application and come to a baseline scaling profile for your web app. So moving on, what exactly is automatic scaling? App Services has always supported scaling in many different forms for I think ever since we've been there as a service. So we started with manual scaling. We always had rule-based scaling, and around a couple of years back, we started working on automatic scaling, which was more like a simplistic way of letting your web apps scale in and out based on incoming HTTP traffic. Now, we were in preview for almost a year. Sometime around the same time last year, we announced the preview. And within the year of 1 year of preview duration, we did receive some really nice feedback from all of you out there. And we sort of incorporated some of the top asks. And then we've announced the GA, I guess, in last week of March 2024. And now, yeah, we are in GA of automatic scaling. So now what exactly is automatic scaling? It basically lets your web app scale out and in based on incoming HTTP traffic. It's available for all premium SKUs. And again, from a developer or an architect standpoint, what you can do, you can basically control how your individual web apps within the same plan scale. So it's sort of per app, per web app scaling. You can again define the minimum number of instances that should always be available for an individual web app. Now, there can always be scenario that one, you define the minimum number of always ready instances, but you may also want to define the maximum number of instances. And this becomes a super useful scenario when you're connected to a backend. And if you have a doubt that the backend may not scale as fast as your app, I mean, that's always the case. Probably you have some sort of a super loaded or a super complex database or an API endpoint, and you really don't want that to be overwhelmed. So that's where setting the maximum number of instances comes into play. And of course, we also have this super slick concept of pre-warmed instances. So what that basically means is that while your web app starts scaling out, we always have this sort of a pre-warmed instance available, so that once, let's say, if you're saying that I want my web app to scale to 5 instances and you're already on 3, now by the time you want the 4th instance to be available, it's already pre-warmed and available. So basically that helps eliminate some of the cold start issues for your web app.
It creates a smoother ramp.
Yes. So basically, it's not like, you have to wait for a new instance to be available. It's already pre-warmed, available to be just pulled into the whole scaling event.
Mhm.
Now, let's look at some of the use cases where you may want to use the automatic scaling. Remember, you still have the manual scale, the rule-based scale. Now, some of the use cases that come to my mind when we talk about when to use automatic scaling. Now, again, you just want to use a simplistic way of setting up HTTP-based or HTTP load-based scaling, something like you don't really care much about the metrics. I mean, you don't want to scale based on a very specific metric, let's say the incoming load or the HTTP request queue sort of metrics, or the memory or the CPU percentage sort of a metric. You just want to scale based on the HTTP traffic. So that's one key scenario for using automatic scaling. Second is, as I said, quite often you will have multiple web applications within the same app service plan. Now, for a plan, I may say that the maximum burst or the maximum my plan can scale is up to 30, because that's the maximum that we support on any of the web app service plans. So basically, you can say that my plan can scale up to 30. But within that plan, I might have 2 web applications, A and B. And I want A to scale up to the plan maximum, that is 30. But I want B to scale only up to, say, 10 instances. You can always do that. So that's the max. Similarly, talking about minimum, you can always say that probably the web application A requires more infrastructure. It's more complex. It's more chatty with the backend. You can say I want 5 always ready instances. Similarly, my web application B is not that load centric. Maybe I can just run it on 2 instances at all times. So you always have those sort of knobs and controls when we talk about automatic scaling. And as I earlier said, the third use case could be that we are basically connected to some sort of maybe a legacy system or a super loaded or a super busy web backend. And that is where, again, you may want to control and see that your backends don't get overwhelmed. And that is where you could set up the maximum instances that you want your web app to scale to.
Yeah, I think also budget, right? If you're constrained by budget and you know that you can't be running on 30 instances for the whole month, but you can have bursts of up to 10 instances that will stay within the budget, that helps.
In addition to that, there is another interesting use case. That's a very valid point, Byron, but there's another important use case. Assume a scenario you have manual scaling set up just for a single instance, for example. Mm-hmm. What you can also do is you can use automatic scaling, set up the plan maximum, say 10 or 30, whatever you think is appropriate for your web application, and still have the always ready instance as 1. So most of the time will only be built for that single instance. But what would happen is, in case if there is a sudden spike in load, for that momentarily aspect or timeline, your web app can scale to maybe 5 or 6 web applications. And remember, you'll only be built for that amount of time. So that's again a very a simple to configure use case for your web application.
Yeah, what I've seen is people go use the old rule-based autoscale, and they spend all of this time thinking about what metric, and then they set the rule to scale up, and the first thing that they forget is that they also need to scale down.
Exactly.
So I think that's an important point, right? The automatic scale does both of those for you without you having to do the PhD level math, figuring out this is the rate of scale, this is the rate of scale down for my app to be helpful.
Exactly, and precisely to your point, Byron. I mean, there have been use cases, there have been situations in the past where maybe I just forgot to have a scale in rule when it comes to rule-based scaling, and what that means is once my web app is scaled out, it remains that way.
Yep. Yeah, and then we get the billing question. How come this month it's 10 times more than
and
last
you can easily avoid those scenarios with automatic scaling. So again, I mean, it's definitely way easier to use.
Yeah, and we think about it in a continuum of control, right? So if you know what you're doing, you won't beat the schedule autoscale, but it's basically pre-scaling your app for an event, or the rule base, because you can fine tune it. But if this is a new application, or you're not necessarily familiar with the load profile, Autoscale is smart enough to get you off the bat, and then you can choose to graduate over to rules based. So it's never an or, it's more of a how do you, which one is the right fit for you in your journey with your app.
Exactly, and that is what I'm trying to talk on this slide as well. What's the comparison, a quick comparison of all the different scale out options. Now, again, if you have a pretty stable web application, you are confident about the load that you experience. I mean, you are good with a manual scaling. But if you're looking at more fine-grained control where I just want to scale based on, say, memory percentage or a CPU percentage, sort of a metric, and again, you understand the metric pretty well, I mean, you could continue to use the rule-based scaling. Or the other important use case is if you're looking at a schedule-based scaling, like I know it's a LOB, internal LOB web application, and I just want Monday to Friday 5 instances, and over the weekend I just want 2 instances. Again, rule-based scaling is your friend, is your choice at that point of time. Now, automatic scaling, again, as you said, Byron, I mean, if it's a new web application or you're not pretty sure about how much of load to expect, that's where maybe you can just set maybe a couple of instances based on what you guess would be the right set of SKU and the right number of always available instances, and then let the web application scale. And over a period of time, if you have created a load profile, maybe you can play around with different options. The other difference in the two scaling or the different scaling options is also that when it comes to rule-based scaling or when it comes to manual scaling, it is for a plan. You don't have the option to go and tinker with individual web applications within the plan. But with automatic scaling, you can always do that. So again, if you want to have different scaling experiences for different web applications within the same plan, again, you tend to use the automatic scaling. So these are some of the important differences between the 3 scaling options.
Yeah, you bring a really good point. So let me rephrase, make sure that I'm getting this right. So when you're doing manual scale or rule-based scale, and if I have an app service plan with 3 apps, those apps are going to be running on all the instances, no matter if I set it to 10 or if I set it to 1.
Exactly.
Whereas with the new autoscale feature, you could set limits for each app independently. So your plan might still go to 10, but in some instances you only have one app running. In others, you might have 2 or 3 of them, depending on how it gets.
Exactly. And again, it's very difficult to define it in a quantitative manner. But behind the scene, I think we have built enough smarts to try and load balance to best of ability across the available instances. So yes, that's always the case, and a great use case for automatic scaling. So as you said, I may have 10 instances for the plan, and
Right.
maybe my web app A is there on all 10 instances because that's probably how I configured it. but web app B could only be on 5 of those.
Right.
Yes, that's perfectly possible, but that's not a use case that you can solve with rule-based or manual scaling.
Awesome. Well, this is really cool. And I think the other thing to call out is that it's a new scenario for App Service, but we're using the scale module that has been used for functions forever, right?
Exactly.
So this is a pretty mature piece of code.
Yes. So this is pretty much an offshoot of the Elastic Premium HTTP scaler that we are using here. So again, it's also an example of how one of our I should say a sister service uses a feature, is popular, and we try and bring that over to app services as a service, as a feature. So yeah.
Awesome. So can we see this in action, or what's next?
Yes. So finally, before I get into the demo, just a quick call out on what's new at GA. So now, I mean, we always had support for Linux and Windows, both code and container, but at GA, we have made it available for all premium pricing tiers, right from P0 V3 all the way up to P5 MV3. So it's there across all premium SKUs. And also, we have added a new dedicated metric for automatic scaling called as automatic scaling instance count. What that means is basically during the time or that event window when the scaling event is happening, the metric will tell you how many virtual machines or how many instances from an app services parlance were deployed for your web application. So exactly that's what this metric does.
Awesome. So, I'm assuming that this is one of the standard metrics that we see in the portal,
Yes.
And so I could plot, for example, HTTP requests and number of instances, and you should be able to see, the correlation of requests coming up and instances going up.
Exactly. And
Nice.
that is precisely the demo that my colleague Yutang is going to cover when she talks about automatic Azure load testing with automatic scaling. So that's exactly the demo you're going to see.
That's cool.
So let me switch over to how do I configure automatic scaling in the first place. So yes, I mean, it's the standard scale out option on the menu. So if you see, currently, basically, I have one instance available and I am on the P0 V3 pricing tier. I already have automatic scaling, but let's.
Oh, sorry. Let me bring up your screen, Guarav. There we go. Okay, so we went to the scale out.
Yes, we went to the scale out. We went to scale out, and now I am on the scale out screen. Basically, I see all the three options: manual, automatic, and rule based. I'm actually going to select automatic scaling. Now, because I already had it configured at some point of time, so you can see some values over here. But as I said, remember, maximum burst is the number of instances that my app service plan can scale to. So if you see the value 5, what that indicates is that although the plan can scale to 30, I have constrained it to 5. So the entire plan can only scale up to 5. Maybe for the sake of simplicity, let me drag the slider over to 30. That means my plan can scale to maximum.
Right. And this is, again, the reason why you would set it to something less than 30 could be either budget, or that there is a downstream dependency that you're going to flood if you go up to 30 instances.
Exactly. Now, always ready instances, remember, is specific to a web app. So right now, if I see this eShop migration web app, basically it's a sample web app where I've deployed this. Basically, when I say 1, what this means is that under the normal load profile or load scenarios, I mean, till the point I see a spike in load, my web application is going to be always ready or always available on a single instance. I can again.
So this would be like the minimum.
Yes, this is basically what I call minimum. Now, if I drag this slider over to 5, what this means is that at any given point in time, I will have 5 always ready instances available for this web application, or you can say minimum.
Right. And then this is, you're setting the limit
Yes.
for this specific app.
Yes. So basically, okay, just for numerical simplicity, let me do this. So what this means now is my plan can scale to 30. The minimum number of instances for this web application is 5, and I have opted in to enforce a scale out limit, and this web application can maximum scale out to 10 instances. It won't scale out to 30. So basically the load profile for this web application, to keep it simple, would be 5 minimum and 10 maximum. That's how it is.
Yeah, and if you have, one app in the app service plan, then the maximum scale limit and the maximum burst should be the same, right? Because you're not sharing the resource. But
No,
if you have
the maximum burst for for all the web applications would be the same, but the minimum and maximum per web application can always be different.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the scenario where there's only one app in that plan.
Yes, then you're not sharing any resources. So yes, it's the same.
I think the other one that I was talking about is because you can also configure this at your staging slot, right? So for example, you want your production app to use all of the 30 instances, but you want to limit your staging slot to only be running in 1 or 2 instances because you're just doing like that last mile validation, right? So that's another.
Yes, that's actually another great scenario to think about, because what may also happen is that you might decide to do a load testing on your staging scenario without overwhelming your production slot.
Right.
So that is where again you may just constrain that to some minimum number of instances or much lesser number of instances, and then do the load testing. So yes, that's again a great scenario to be used for.
I mean, I usually tell people, if you're going to load test, run it on a separate app service plan because you don't want to be load testing production. But this would be like a way to control the damage if you were to load test.
Yes, that's not an ideal scenario, but if you decide to do so, probably that's the way around.
Fair enough.
So this is basically, I would say, this is all that it takes to configure automatic scaling.
I guess my other question would be, how long does it take for an instance to come in?
Again, I would say that we are behind the scene. If I see how this whole thing works, is we continuously monitor the traffic, like literally every few seconds we do that. And the moment we see literally the traffic going up, we start pulling in the pre-warmed instance. So how this is going to work is, I have set 5 minimum instances. So right now this web applications is available on 5 instances. Assume the traffic starts going up, we will first pull in the pre-warmed instance, and then the instance count would become 6. And similarly, we'll have a 7th instance available as a pre-warmed instance. So based on how fast my traffic goes, it's basically a matter of minutes that you will have the instance being added to this plan, so that my web app can scale. And similarly, when it comes to scale in, I could say that the scale in could happen within like 5 to 10 minutes. So that's the kind of quick scale out and quick scale in that happens with this feature.
Yeah. And I guess for me as the developer of the app, I also need to know, I shouldn't be putting a bunch of code on the cold start so that my app can react fast, right? If I'm populating a bunch of caches and I'm doing a bunch of SQL queries before my app is even to the point of serving the first request, that's going to slow down my scale out time, because it needs to get to the point where it's.
Yes, that's
kind of like the 2 parts of the equation.
Yes, that's 2 different parts of the equation, because currently there is no direct way of saying that if I have a pre-warmed instance, can I have a pre-warmed app on that instance?
Right.
It's basically the instance which is pre-warmed, not your app per se. So I don't want to confuse folks out there. It's not like unlike Elastic Premium Functions where you do have a warm-up trigger. So that sort of a thing may not be the case here, because remember, this is your full-blown app. So exactly as you said, I mean, if you are looking to avoid cold start scenario, for your web application. One is the infra, which this would take care with pre-warmed instances. The other is the app side of the cold start. And that is where basically if you have a hot cache or something available for the web application, it makes it much faster.
Yeah, and this is where we want people to upload all of that to like a Redis or something that is externalized from the app itself.
And if you have static content, remember we always have the feature of bring your own storage. So basically just mount in Azure file share and plonk all your maybe your images, your videos on the file share, and then reference them in your web application. That makes things even faster.
Makes sense. Okay, so I just want to take a second here, remind people, hey, if you have questions, throw them in the chat. We'll do our best to answer them live. If you're watching this already recorded, you can also reach out to us on Twitter, and same thing, like we'll get to your questions and answer them, or give you the links to the docs, etc.
Absolutely. With that, I would hand over to Yutang, and we'll see how we can use the new integrated experience for Azure load testing along with automatic scaling.
Yeah, because that's usually the next question, right? Is how can I have some confidence on my app that the load is not going to kill it, or if I want to see the scale out feature, you're not going to be sitting on your browser hitting F5. How can you do this a little bit more in a realistic scenario? So here comes load test. Yutang, take it away.
Yeah, before that, could we switch first to the deck? We could just do like a quick intro and overview.
Here we go.
Thank you. Okay, so hello everyone. Yeah, I am here to talk about the Azure load test integration with App Service. So just to give you like a quick idea, what is, I guess, Azure load testing with the App Service integration. So there are a lot of ways where customers can figure out, hey, what is enough load? How much instances should I actually set my app service to? But what makes this integration really easy is that customers can do everything within the blade of App Service web app. Everything is filtered to just that web app. Technically, there is an Azure load testing resource that you can create. You can test any app you want, but this one really just wants to show you the convenience of having everything within the overview blade of your app service web app. So for the apps, Azure load testing, you can start running tests, HTTP tests onto your web app, whether you want custom domains, default host names, you could pick whichever. And as well as you can run up to like 24 hours for your load test. It might be too long, or maybe it's not enough. Let us know how you feel about the time limit, and up until like 100,000 concurrent virtual users. We do know everyone has different capacity and needs for their web app. So we hope this has enough constraints for you to play around with to ensure you what is needed for your web app. And obviously, what's more important is that after you run load tests, you want to be able to see what is the data, how is my app doing. So we will be giving you also client-side metrics and server-side metrics just to see how your web app behaves with this load testing. You don't, like Byron previously said, you don't really have to go create a whole new set of web apps in order to do this. You could use perhaps like your dev environments, your test environment, just do this testing, and when everything looks good, perhaps you could do a swap with your slots if that is currently what you're using as well. And just like give you an idea of how this works is that right now you can also, it currently runs like JMeter scripts. So what happens here in this integration is that you are able to, it creates a JMeter script automatically based on whatever configuration you're going to pick. I can show you later how you go through all this configuration. And one of the very popular questions that came up actually when we talked about this previously is that customers are asking, hey, could we do K6 testing? So K6 testing is currently not supported for this as well. But if this is important, also do let us know, because we would love to hear from you what is important, what perhaps you think you'd love to see on this as well. This, by the way, is a collaboration that we are doing with the Azure load testing team. So if you have any feedback, I would love to also just forward them over to the team as well. So do leave comments on the chat and we'll look through them as well. And probably one of the questions is why load test? Like, obviously, Guarav has his automatic scaling. Like, why do we still have to do load testing? So this is very important because you want to be able to understand what is the load and the limitations of your web app. Maybe perhaps you have a sale coming up and you have lots of customers who are about to hit up your site. You want to ensure that your customers don't end up getting stuck on your site, getting a lot of errors because you have too much load that's coming through. This will, you'll lose a lot of money if your customers end up giving up, not wanting to go to your website because everything is too slow. So in order for you to be able to prepare for that well, you could start load testing things. You can ensure that, hey, is the bottleneck perhaps my web app is not very functional, where it's kind of like have a lot of great response, or maybe your bottleneck is in your database that hasn't have enough capacity control all the incoming loads as well. But at the end of the day, it's really to help you have a lot of ways to control and ensure that you are providing the enough limit. And how you can really integrate this with automatic scaling is that maybe you are not sure up to what instance you should set up your maximum capacity to be. So go ahead and try to, load test a little bit, figure out what is perhaps the correct percentage of CPU usage that you want. Maybe the response rate is more important. And once you get enough feel of like how many instances based on, you do have that metrics coming up also with the automatic scaling, you can get a good view of, okay, maybe once I hit 6 instances, this is already too much and I don't want to pay for this. So this is how you can figure out how to configure things correctly with load testing while also using automatic scaling. But maybe like Guarav said, you need scheduling scaling more importantly. This can also help you figure out what is the number of instances you could set for this schedule. And yeah, now I would actually want to just go through with you this demo to kind of like give you a feel about what is this integration all about, what is this hype and excitement that I am currently experiencing talking about Azure load testing.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of load testing. Like, I think knowing and understanding where and how your application breaks is a key part of the development lifecycle. So anything that makes it easier to integrate this to the cycle of developing new versions of your app, updating it, and seeing the changes of whether your code is having an impact on the total number of requests that you can have or not, I think it's very, very valuable.
Yeah, it's like you don't want your customers to be the ones actually load testing your web app, because that would not be fun. So, okay, as you can see, I did mention everything is all within the web app overview. So this is my web app. And if you scroll down to the performance section, you could see load testing. It is currently on preview. So we will be GAing in, I believe we are targeting sometime build to actually get this GA'd. So please do go ahead and try this out now. You can definitely see displayed on your portal as well. So just to give you like a quick understanding of what display does is I'll start with kind of like the bigger part of the umbrella, the load testing resource. So when you come to the load testing resource, you could see every single load test resource that is already associated with your web app. So I could have already created a bunch of different load test resource, but because it wasn't ran against this web app, it's not going to end up showing here. So we really just want to give you like a clear-cut view, removing all the noise, because you probably have tens and thousands perhaps of web apps running within your subscription. So what this does is just removes all the noise from everything else, and let's just focus on your actual given web app. And now if you go into test, these are the different test configurations where you have set to run against this web app, and the test runs are pretty much the test that have been ran against the actual test resource. So just think of it as like the big umbrella, the middle umbrella, and kind of like the leaf of like the entire tree. So
for example, you could have a single load test resource in your subscription, and you could be with that resource, you could be load testing multiple different things, not just web apps. So this gives you the zoomed in focus view of the load tests that are specifically targeting your app, so that you don't need to distinguish between something that is running against your Kubernetes cluster or something else.
That is correct. Yes, that is very true. And then now, okay, so I'll just go ahead and kind of like give you a view of how you could get started. So here I already have a test that's created. So I stuck with load. You can see I have a couple of other load tests here, but you didn't see it a while ago in that previous view. As I previously said, that it's not related, so we just hide it away from you. And now you can figure out what name you want to call it. So I say live session test. And then, okay. So here is what makes this part really neat. So we do know that for production purposes, good practice is to always have slots available so you can be able to swap things very quickly from dev to test and whatnot. I currently actually don't really have a slot, but if you have created a slot, you're able to pick all the different slots that have been created against that web app. So for example,
And
since
if
I
you
only
were
have
paying attention, you set autoscale on your slot to limit it to only a couple of instances so that you don't take over your whole resource with that, right?
Yeah, that is correct. And then, okay, so here you can, so this one really is just focusing on HTTP tests for this particular blade. So here you can pick up the different URL. So if you have custom domains added here to your web app, you'll be able to test against custom domains as well. It's really just dependent on what you think is important to test against, whether it's a default host name that we provide you or the custom host names that you have brought in and added to your web app. And for example, if you have different paths that you want to be able to test, you could go ahead and add that in. And also just different HTTP methods. So if you think there are some perhaps a post, you want to do some updates to your web app, whatnot, you can go ahead and add it here as well. So obviously we do know that for real production web apps, everything has a lot more complications where they're like headers and parameters that you want to provide your web app. So the Azure Load Testing already thought about this through and added everything in here so that you are able to put all these information that you need in order to run it. So mine's going to be a very simple get on the home page. So I'm just going to go ahead and click add. And the next is the load configuration. So this is actually the fun part of where you could start figuring out the details of how you want to do your load testing. So they have a engine instance. Think of it as similar to the instances for Azure, for automatic scaling, where I can figure out how many more instances additionally you want to be able to run against your load test. So currently, I believe they max at 250 per instance. So if you want to be able to have more users, you will just have to make sure you do the math correctly for your instances and also your concurrent users as well. Because if you see I click 300, it says it has to be between 250. So that's in a way how you can figure out how you want to go past 200. And the pattern, so depending on what you really need, you do have the option of doing linear, a spike, a step. It's really just dependent on what is your user behavior. If your users probably have like a time in the day where everything's just gonna go crazy, maybe spike is what you need. But let's say maybe you are going through like a long work day where maybe sometime during the middle of the day, it's gonna slowly come up and get really busy. You can look into a step or linear. That really depends on to you. And you can also figure out how you want to be able to do this kind of ramp up. So let's say I want to be able to do a 15-minute ramp up. You can see this like adjustment from 0 slowly up to 250 with the ramp up of 15 minutes.
Right. Yeah, and this is, I guess, the different patterns, right? If you're doing a stress test or a load test, or to get it to the point of break, you're gonna defining different shapes of tests.
Yes, that really is. Yeah. So it's really just giving you more power to define like what kind of configuration really fits your needs.
And I think you mentioned this earlier, but right now, all of this you're doing it manually. But if you have scripted it through like JMeter or something like that, you can also upload a script that is more complex.
Yes, that is correct. You can upload it, though unfortunately you currently can't do it through this blade itself. You would have to go directly into your Azure Load Testing and then be able to upload and create a new test based on your uploaded file.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. Like, you can always do all of this stuff that we're showing right now directly on the load testing resource, but right now, because we're going through the integration in the web app, it's kind of like the simple view.
Yes, so it's kind of like, it's simplicity for people perhaps not familiar with it. It's a great place to start. If you want something more advanced, definitely go through the actual blade. But if you do think you would like something more advanced in integration, also let us know. Happy to hear all of like your thoughts and feedback as well. And so the finals, here's also the configuration if you want to do things in a public or private setting. But for us, for the sake of simplicity for this demo, we'll just click everything for public. And let's go and hit load and create. And after review and create, it's going to start running. So as you can see, it's creating a JMeter script. And then once it finishes creating it, it's going to upload it to the test and start running the test. But I'm not going to let everyone here watch the test run because I don't think that's as exciting. So I have a couple of tests already that I have ran previously, whereas, as I said, you could see all these tests that have been ran against a web app. And here is just like a quick information about how many virtual users, the average response rate and whatnot that have been done again. And one really cool thing I want to call out is if you go directly here, you could actually see the descriptions. So I was able to add some descriptions to say like, hey, these are what I did test for manual scaling. This is what I did for automatic scaling with 2 instances, 5 instances, random tests that I created. So this just gives you like a very general info so you can look at things very quickly. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known like what I have done within those tests. So it's nice to have this description box. Okay, so now the really neat thing that I want to talk about, I want to take things back to Guarav's section of automatic scaling, is let me do a quick comparison between 2 of my test runs. So one is against the manual scaling and the other is against the automatic scaling. So here you see up here, there's like the compare button. You want to be able to click on that and it shows you a view of all the different metrics that that has happened during the time slot of like when we ran the test. So as you can see here, we have manual, which is pink, and automatic scaling, which is blue. So technically, think about it as we want to be team blue or periwinkle at this time. So, okay, here I just want to go through over kind of like the data. You have more or less about the same virtual users, the request. It does get a little bit bumpy because sometimes currently for our load testing, I didn't call this out, by the way. For load testing, you're also able to define how you think is a successful test run. This is something that you could define during creation, but I believe you have to go through the advanced methods in order to do that. So you could define like, hey, what is successful, what is not successful test run. Also, right now, for a lot of our test runs, the default setting is it turns off the moment it has too much of error rates coming up. Okay, so it looks like it jumped back up just to show you how things will look. So here it's saying like, okay, they're provisioning, the test run will start, but it's just like how things will look. But I'll go back again just to show you the more final view.
So to put that in context, let's say that you have an acceptance criteria that says with this amount of load, all requests should be less than 250 milliseconds. And that you can define that in the test and then have a thumbs up, thumbs down result based on what actually came back.
Yeah, actually, to quickly show you how that works, I could, let's see. So this is kind of like the actual resource view. And then you want to be able to go to the test. And then here I could say test and go on edit. So when you want to edit things, you want to be able to just give it a sec. Okay, test criteria. So here is kind of like what Byron and I were talking about is like, okay, if you want to have certain response time, and then, let's say your threshold is a certain milliseconds. So that's how you define whether things fail or not. And at the same time here, currently everything by default is set to autostop. So if it really hits a very high number of error percentage, the test is just going to stop because obviously we don't want to waste your resources where you generate a lot of instances just to do a load test. So if you think that is not as important, or perhaps you actually just really want to hit the maximum limit, you can go ahead and disable it as well.
Right. But keep in mind that you're paying for the minutes that the load test is running as well as the instances that are running on App Service. So you should think of this as the saving money button.
Yes, that is correct. Okay, so yeah, this is just like a quick view on how that works. And then let's go back to that view of where we show you the information, the comparisons.
So we should be team pink here, right? Because we want auto scale to be better than manual scale.
Oh yes, team pink. Thank you. So, okay, team pink. So let's see, one of the things that I want to call out. So here is the server-side metrics. So as you can see, team pink right now, so we have like requests coming through, and then we see the HTTP response rate. It's always like much lower than in comparison than to the manual scaling. But one thing to note here, technically this is higher right now, but do keep in mind for manual scaling, it already started at 2 instances, whereas our automatic scaling started as one, but eventually, things level out, it keeps up. But really what happens here is that all this time that perhaps you didn't need 2 instances, we are saving you cost from not having to already deploy instances that you don't need. So with automatic scaling, we pretty much give what you need and take out or kind of like scale things back out down to like whatever you don't really need. And as you can see, things are actually pretty consistent within this run. This is like a very simple, just at scaling things at 2 instances, but just want to let you imagine if you're able to do something at a much bigger scale, it would actually show you quite a lot of difference in terms of all these different test runs that we're doing. And not to mention, even for the metric-based scaling, a lot of they have limitations in terms of how often they will check things for you and looking back at like the metric data, and also like how frequently you'll be able to test things. But then, as Guarav said, our automatic scaling does this very quickly. So it really just shows you how we are really just trying to generate more data within less time to be able to help you figure out like what is the best for you. And as Byron and Guarav pointed out a while ago, the main thing is we also kill the instances later on that you don't need, so that you don't end up forgetting to scale things back to like a lower number of instances, which is actually, unfortunately, a common problem that we see customers tend to forget about.
Yep. Awesome. This is really exciting. Like, I think the 2 features kind of like go side by side really, really well. So I'm really happy that I was able to get both of you here for this. Any closing thoughts or remarks?
We do have a link in the last part of our deck to show users more info about these 2 features that we have. And then, yes, okay. So here is like a very easy link, hopefully, to help you remember. And Guarav's article in the first one actually goes very in-depth about the integration also. So you can see more info within his blog, whereas he does a lot of different tests within different test runs using different configurations, just to kind of like show you more in-depthly how these 2 features actually work well with each other.
Sweet. And, just a reminder, we have the App Service blog where you can see the constant stream of content that we're publishing. If you're looking for any of the links that we mentioned during this talk, and even some that we didn't, we have a companion blog post that will be coming out there pretty soon. I think maybe today, Denver, thumbs up. You can reach out to us on Twitter. Like I said, if you're watching this on the pre-record, you can always send us your questions. People like Yutang, me, Guarav, Denver are the ones that are looking at that. So we can answer even if it's later on. And then just to wrap up, we do have the next live stream scheduled for June 5th. We were going to be talking about ACE migrations and why, if you're using ACE v1 or ACE v2, we really want you to move over to ACE v3. And you can even save money by doing that. So with that, anything else, Denver? We can wrap it up.
I would just want to conclude with one thought over here, Byron.
Mm-hmm. Go for it.
Yeah, that basically we always had this question, what's the best scale for my web app? If you use these 2 features together, probably you'll have a close to perfect answer for that, which has always been there. Yeah,
the reality is that every app is different. There's no magic number that is going to make your app scale. I think we talked about this. A lot of times people come and tell us, hey, I'm scaled up to 30 instances or more than that, but my app is not working properly. And when we go look at it, there's something behind the scenes that is on the ground, like the database. So you need to understand that app. You need to understand where are the points where it breaks. And just because you can throw compute at it doesn't mean that it's going to scale out. So, having the combination of being able to run load test often, make it part of your development cycle, as well as having the features like the automatic scaling, where you don't need to have a PhD on scaling to, have a good experience and save money with it. Those are the two pillars that kind of like balance this equation out. Awesome. I think we can wrap it up. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you in the next show. And come to Build or come find us at Build. We're all going to be there.